the way I kind of approach it now is I have 9 to 5 to do business, but also personal goals and some family goals as well. But outside of 9 to 5, it's all family for me, except for this podcast. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's a little late on the East Coast for me today, but that's fine. I design my day around it, so it works.
Hmm.
And so I'm very regimented today about 9 to 5, and I'll just walk you through my day today. Like my son Henry woke up at 5 a.m., which is great. It's a little early, so I was flustered, but I got him at 5, and I played with him until 8, and then my nanny got there at 8. And after you play with your son, a 2-year-old son, from 5 to 8, you are or can be mentally exhausting, right? I enjoyed the time with him. Obviously, I love him a lot,
For sure.
but I was mentally exhausted.
I get it.
And normally I would go into the office at 8 or 8:15.
Mm.
But today I was like, you know what? I'm not ready to go in. So I drove to the park and went on a 2-mile run.
Mm.
I felt wonderful after my 2-mile run. I called my
Hmm.
trainer. He had an opening. I went to the gym and worked out with him. And
Beautiful.
then I was like, you know what? I don't really want to go to the office yet either. I'm going to go home, eat lunch. I had lunch with my son. And then I went into the office later.
Hmm.
And I think it's extremely important, when I design my day and how I work and the responsibilities that fall on my shoulders, I have the flexibility to do those things.
Hmm.
And that's just the chapter that I'm in my life today. Could I have done that with digital crafts? Probably not. Also had a 50-50 business partner.
Hmm.
So you don't want to let him or her down when you have a partner. In this new company, I'm 100% owner. So I have a little bit more control and flexibility there. It comes with pros and cons, but
Well, and I think, to your point there, and props to you for giving yourself what you need in those moments, right? Because,
Mhm.
I feel like when you get into, your work mode at noon after having, done those things for your health and mental state, right? You're going to go and be that much more productive from 12 to, it's like past 7 p.m. now. It's going to be a much more productive time for you because it was a transition that
Mhm.
worked a lot better than going from, playtime, feeling mentally exhausted, and then trying to go and, kind
Right.
of grind through things mentally. But it sounds like you gave yourself what you needed in those moments, which can be a, kind of a battle to choose between at times. It looks like you might say something if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah. So, I mean, just going back to your original question of how I'm designing
Yeah.
engineer up the business in my day,
Hmm.
I've thought about this overnight after we talked yesterday, and I've actually applied this framework. It's from a guy. His name's Warren Rustin,
Okay.
and you wouldn't know him. I heard him speak at an entrepreneurs organization event, an EO event, like let's say in 2018, and it changed my life. I've been journaling every day since then because he mentioned that.
Okay.
But a few years ago, maybe two, he came out with a book, and it's called The Leader Within Us.
Mm.
And he has a simple framework on how you should design your life. And I've put this to practice for the last few years, and it's really paid off. And so I'm taking that framework, which I'll walk through in a second, and I'm coupling that with Dan Martell's approach to business,
Okay.
and kind of mashing them together. And that's how I'm designing Engineer Up.
Okay.
And what that looks at like is Warren preaches about this framework where you have to have a vision for your life. He calls it a clarity of vision.
Hmm.
And this sounds so cliche, but when I read the book and when I heard Warren talk, it's what I was seeking. So it like resonated with me deeply. But before you do anything, you have to have a vision for your life. After you've defined that vision, you have to make sure that every act you do is intentional on achieving that vision. And then he has a third part of the framework that I think is extremely valuable that a lot of people miss, and that is to make sure that you have a set of values. When you're making all those acts with intent towards your vision, you have to make sure that you can fall back on a set of values,
Mm.
right? When you interact with someone new or you're trying to sell your product to someone, you don't want to do it in a slimy, sleazy way. You have to have a set of values to fall back on.
Hmm.
So then after you achieve this vision, you can look back and be proud of it.
Mm.
So that's the framework I use to design my life. Um, and then if you take Dan Martell's approach to business, where you're offloading tasks, to make sure that you as a leader can stay open-minded and do the most important strategic things. I'm doing that at Engineer Up. My first hire was an executive assistant, and Nina is incredible.
Hmm.
She's my executive assistant. Then I hired a recruiter because recruiting was taking all my time, bringing in new talent.
Mm.
Then I hired a business development executive. So I'm very much like really trying to analyze what am I doing on a daily basis that sucks all my time up,
Mm,
that and also might be like an energy suck for me personally, and offloading those tasks to people that love to do it.
mhm,
Right. The business development executive I just hired loves the cold call.
mhm,
I'm tired of that. I've been doing it for a year and a half now, and I want it's my turn to put that on someone else. But he loves it, right? And that's his expertise.
mm,
So that's kind of the approach I'm taking for Engineer Up. It's kind of like a lifestyle versus Dan Martell's approach to business and putting it together.
mhm. And just to recap for those listening that maybe may not be familiar with Dan Martell's work, it's basically a buy back your time
Right.
principle. Whereas you identify the things for you as an individual that light you up, right? Give you energy
Yep.
and that drive the business forward, most effectively and make you, in his words, make you money. Right. So how can
Right.
you free up your time, Jake, to do those things more, the things that you enjoy and the things that actually drive revenue for
Absolutely.
the business, right? And move the needle. So then to your point, basically being able to outsource things and starting, for entrepreneurs on the show, like starting with that executive assistant who that's who I coordinated with in order to actually schedule this interview was
That's
Nina,
right.
right? And she
Oh
was
yeah.
was amazing to work with.
Yeah.
So, like, and then you and I connected yesterday, right, for the first time. So she did all the back end, like, the nitty gritty, get things coordinated, schedules, emails, aligning things. So then you can
Right.
focus on, the things that are important to you in your well balanced life, like time with Henry in the
Yep.
morning, right? Like your physical health, right? And this well balanced lifestyle. And it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, this Warren Rustin had a pretty big impact on
Huge.
kind of just like designing how you actually want to go and pursue life, right? Starting with that clear
Yeah.
vision. Like, was there so like when you and I'm very curious about this. So when you saw Warren speak live, you saw him speak live, correct? That's what you
On
said?
live and yeah.
Okay. So what did you do on this whole vision aspect? Like, did you have a rough idea going into that, what you kind of wanted
Yeah.
your vision?
So
Like, talk to me about that.
I had some takeaways from Warren's talk back in 2018, 2019.
Mm,
And that takeaway was more about how to start my day every day. And he preaches this process called the 1-10-10-10.
cool. I wanted to
And
ask
I've
about
been
that.
doing that for a number of years now. And
Is that
it
where your
is
journaling's tied into that you mentioned?
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So just really quickly, one is the first second you wake up, you throw your feet on the side of the bed and you ask yourself, why are you on this earth? And
Whoa.
it's really cool to do that for a month because it changes. It might be your wife's birthday or something might have happened. You're like, I'm on this earth today to support her.
Mm,
Or it might be, I am on this earth today to play catch with my kids. Or it might be business related, but it changes. It's really cool to see that over time. So 1 second to say, why are you on this earth? 10-10-10. So 10 minutes of thinking about what you're grateful for. 10 minutes of reading. Warren says reading something that it makes you feel grateful. One thing that I was reading recently is like the most famous speeches of all time.
mm,
And so it's not necessarily like gratefulness reading, but it's just something kind of motivating.
totally.
And then the third 10 is journaling for 10 minutes. And journaling 10 minutes for things you're grateful for. I've kind of twisted that to like I just journal for whatever I want to journal about.
Hmm.
A lot of times it's business. Other times it's like, hey, I'm traveling with my family, and that's nice.
Mm,
So that's the one thing I took away from his speech. And then when he published his book, I read it, and I've probably read it 6 or 7 times now. But if the framework for how
wow.
do you
Okay.
decide the vision or determine the vision for your life, it's really spelled out well in the book. So I was able to follow it, and it probably took me, I say a few days, but it was probably like 2 or 3 weeks to really perfect my vision.
Hmm.
And then, and that changes. I review it every so often and I'll tweak it. But then I take that vision and I set goals that align to it. And if we're going to talk about this a little more later, but for example, part of my vision is the fourth tier is like YOLO. You only live once.
Okay.
And I tie that to like more like physical activities,
Yeah.
right? You only live once, really challenge yourself. And so I've done the half Ironman and I've done the marathon, which we can talk about more. But those are goals that I set that align with my vision.
Right.
And and then I also have a routine that really captures like the intent, right? To make sure everything I do every day is really intentional to achieving those goals and therefore reaching that vision.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect, right? But I would say 70% of the time I'm tracking. And if you look back over the last few years, like I can look back and say proudly that, yeah, I've come a long way and I've made
Mm-hmm.
a lot of steps in the right direction. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not applied this framework.
Mm. So I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to this stuff, and I get like super into it. So when you're, for those who are listening on this whole vision aspect, right?
Right.
And a lot of, people will have a partner, like you have a partner. Are you
Right.
sitting down and like crafting that vision with your partner, or do you have an idea for your personal life and then you try to intertwine it with your partner?
Yeah.
Like how did you navigate that?
So Aaron and I are extremely close, been together for a long time, and we're
Hmm.
pretty aligned on, everything without even us saying it out loud. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
that's amazing.
When it comes to this stuff, it's more me,
Yeah.
and then I review it with her.
Okay. Yeah.
And I do think at some point we'll want to maybe hopefully take it to the next step where we do it together. But now it's more of like, hey, Aaron, this is my vision for our
Hmm.
family.
Hmm.
Can we talk through that? And like, where does it not align with you?
Hmm.
Are
Hmm.
you okay with me taking on this goal this
Hmm.
year?
Hmm.
Because if I do a half Ironman, it's going to take a lot of my time.
Hmm.
So it's more about reviewing it with her to see if she's aligned at a high level, and then just making sure that any kind of commitment I make is not taking time away from our marriage
For
or
sure.
me being a father.
Yeah.
So
Well, then I know that, and thank you for sharing that. I know that's, private information, like
yeah,
personal information. I know that, like Dan Martell and his wife Renee, like they sit down basically in December and will like map out, the upcoming year together, but
right,
taking both of their visions and then coinciding them and integrating them together. I have another friend who is like big Ironman athlete, right? And so when it's like heavy training season, him and his wife sit down, calendars out, and they map
yeah,
out, okay, who's going to take care of the kids this day? Cause she does her own training, right? So it's like, who's got the morning shift? Who's got the evening shift? Who's going to
mhm.
be able to get their second workout in on lunch and so it's like just this, navigation of communication and planning and logistics and integrating visions with goals, and so I think
Yeah.
that's super healthy the way that you're going about it.
I mean,
Yeah.
every couple or individual is going to have their own approach to it, right? And
Right.
the first year I did it, it didn't work for me, but I've continued to tweak it
Mm.
where it works for me and my family.
Hmm.
And, I'll continue to do that as, as we get older, if the kids get older. And
Yeah.
so it's very much a process that evolves.
Right. And I would imagine it's like the same thing with your vision. You have like your general vision, I would say, but I would imagine it kind of tweaks and adjusts depending on curveballs that life throws your way and things
It
you
does.
don't
Well,
don't plan for. So,
to be very honest, the vision stays pretty much the same.
okay.
Warren will say you need to create a vision that you can repeat, like a one sentence thing.
Hmm.
That's not what I did,
Hmm.
right? I have a line for my family. I think for my personal life, like my personal goals, my friendships, and entrepreneurship. I
Okay.
think that's kind of how it
It's
goes.
like bucketed out.
It's bucketed out,
Yeah.
and then I set goals for each bucket.
Hmm.
So the goals change,
Hmm.
right? So, if I set a goal where I want to fly fish every month
Yeah,
because that helps me, be at peace.
for sure.
But also I just want to become a better fly fisherman. Like I want to become better. And so you got to keep doing it. It's really hard to pick fly fishing back up if you hadn't done it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I'll have a month where I don't go, and I can either change the goal or continue down the path.
Mm.
Right. So sometimes I'll change the goal because like, hey, this just isn't going to work with the responsibilities I have as a father or
Hmm.
whatever it may be.
Hmm.
Or it's like, you know what, I had a bad month, but I'm back on it and I'm
Hmm.
going to finish this next
Hmm.
one. So I adjust my goals, but for the most part, the vision that has stayed the same.
I'm smiling big because in your podcast that I listened to yesterday on that 0 to 5,000, you mentioned the fly fishing, and I'm going down to Louisiana here in a couple of weeks to visit
Okay.
my sister, and
Redfish.
you literally caught me. I was Googling where I can go fly fish today on online, so I was like trying to look up where I can go. So that's
If you're going
hilarious.
down to the coast, it's like the best in the world for redfish. So
Okay, Cool. Well, I will add that to my next,
Literally the best in the world.
wow. Okay. Yeah, we may have to take that offline because
I've never been down there, but it's on my bucket list for sure.
well, if that's on your bucket list, sounds like it should be on mine too. And you have a we'll get into this later, but you have a pretty cool bucket list is what it sounded like. So got it, we'll touch on that here in a little bit, but I think where this vision is kind of stemming and transitioning into is, you have your different buckets, right? Relationships, family
Yep.
life, entrepreneurship and business and health goals, fitness, right? And so, you know, one thing that you are a big advocate for and have transitioned into, in life. And it's even from, you've been sports back in the day and everything, but like this well balanced lifestyle, right?
Hmm.
And making sure to prioritize the family time, your personal time, your health and wellness, right? Your hobbies, fly fishing, goals,
Yep.
right? Um, so how do you go about like thinking about your weeks and your months, or are there like non-negotiables that you set up, or do you just take it, is it more of like a, fluid approach? Like, how do you think about well-balanced lifestyle? Or like, what would you like the audience to know about how you think about it now compared
Yeah,
to
so
even like where you
mine
were?
is not a fluid approach. Like I don't just let things happen. I very
Hmm.
much plan things. So,
Hmm.
which this is a big difference between my wife and I. She's more fluid, like if the day's open, we'll go do something fun, is the way she would approach it. And I'm like,
Hmm. Hmm.
if the day's open, we need to plan something like 2 days before so I know that we're gonna go do this for fun.
Right.
But that's just my style. And so I
Hmm.
do plan everything out. And I've even gotten better about this recently. And so, but it all goes back to my goals. So if my goal is to fly fish every month, I book that on my calendar
Hmm.
and I take off work to do it. I do
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
I'll block the whole Tuesday or Thursday because those are days I don't work out at the gym
Okay.
and I'll go fly fishing. And so I have found personally for me that I'm able to achieve more goals, whether it's family related, health related, professional, or personal, if I plan for it,
Hmm.
right? I know that I'm going to spend more time with my daughter Eleanor and teaching her how to ride a bike if it's planned. If it's not planned for me, I may forget about it, and instead
Hmm.
of taking her outside to ride the bike, I'll, just hang out with her and, in the kitchen.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and neither one's wrong, but my goal is to teach her how to ride the bike.
Right.
So if it's planned, then I tackle it. So I'm very much of a planner.
Yeah. Well, I hear intentionality. You are very intentional with
Uh, yeah.
what you're going to do with your time
And I'm
is
not
really good.
perfect.
Hmm.
And I think it's okay for everybody to know that. Like, it's okay not to be perfect. But if for 70, 80% of the time you follow through,
Hmm.
just imagine how much better you're going to be after five
Right.
years.
Right. And so, taking your intentionality with time and planning into consideration. Yesterday, you and I talked about big challenges, right?
Hmm.
Specifically, the half Ironman that I believe it was your brother challenged you to
Right.
do. And so, there's obviously you can't just show up at the start line and give it a go for an Ironman. You got to do a lot of training that comes with
Yeah.
a lot of planning out your day, especially when you have a family, a wife, you're a father, you run a business, right? You got all these things going on. You want to hit your fly fishing goals, right? So,
Right.
um, what was that challenge, and kind of walk
Yeah.
us through that process of the half Ironman, and then where it led you.
Yeah.
Um,
So the half
mhm.
Ironman, as you mentioned, is something my older brother challenged me to do. And it was
Okay,
like the best thing that ever happened to me.
yeah. Why do you
And
think he challenged you to do it in that time?
say again.
Why do you think he challenged you to do that half Ironman at that time?
Well, my brother and I are extremely close.
Okay.
And a little bit of backstory. He lived in Singapore for like 8 years,
Hmm.
so a long way away from the
Hmm.
US.
Yeah, very
And then
much
he
so.
moved back to Denver. And Atlanta's still pretty far from Denver,
Hmm.
but we've been pretty close, and we've just maintained a really, really strong relationship. And I think he was just like, you know what, if I want to double down on that, he's very passionate, or was, about these long endurance challenges. And
Right.
he's like, you know what, I'm going to bring Jake along with me so we can kind of do it together and just
I
have
love
that
it. Cool.
friendship, brothership.
Very cool.
So that's why he didn't have to challenge me. He didn't need my help to challenge, like push him. He's very driven,
Hmm.
but I'm really glad he did it. And the story that I shared with you that I do want to share with your audience that was life-changing for me is, you know, the reason that half Ironman was life-changing for me is that really throughout my life, a lot of things have come easily.
Mm-hmm.
And, good grades in school, make friends easily, girlfriends, just everything. I did well in sports. So everything for me, I had a really good family. It's not to say that there weren't challenges along the way, right? And people didn't help me, luck wasn't involved. I'm very grateful for that. But everything did kind of come easy for me. And then when I did the half Ironman, I trained what I think was very hard for 3 months. I trained more for that event than I trained for anything. And now I just think back like, man, if I trained that hard for soccer, like how good could I have been?
Mm.
But anyways,
Mm.
I trained 3 months religiously for that half Ironman. I flew out to Boulder and I failed. I wasn't able to finish the race. I finished the swim, but I finished the bike ride too slow. So when I finished the bike ride, they wouldn't let me go into the run because I was behind the cutoff time. And I wasn't really devastated. My legs hurt so bad that I was kind of like happy that they told me I couldn't go because I would have kept going. And but I wasn't devastated or anything. I just didn't really know how to process it.
Mm.
And so on the way home with my wife, Erin, we looked up the schedule and we saw that the next race was going to be in Augusta, Georgia, which is a short drive from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, you know what? Like, you've already done all this training. I don't want you to train anymore because it takes you away from us, but do it for one more month and go down there and do the race.
What
And
an amazing
I
partner.
knew I knew I could do the race.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the most devastating piece about failing is I knew I could do it,
Mm.
but my legs cramped up, and I think it was the nutrition plan that I was on that didn't help.
Mm.
Long story short, I trained for one more month, dialed in my nutrition plan, went down to Augusta, and finished the race.
Wow.
And it was an incredible feeling to look back on that and say, I worked extremely hard and I still failed, but I was able to get back up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And very rarely have I worked very hard for something and failed. And I think it was just such an eye opener. Um, and I've actually applied that lesson to life a few times since then. And yeah, it was an incredible story for me, and it's something I like to share with others.
It's I mean, anytime that we could talk endurance feats and sports and failures and comebacks, like that's
Yeah.
a jam that a lot of people, can get behind and be inspired by. I
And I
also
know you
think,
have an impressive record there as well with
yeah, it's
Mary.
just,
Yeah.
it's similar to your brother, just have that like endurance mindset. Always wanted to do, big things. I've done my fair share of ultra marathons, and I mean, I feel
Hmm.
like it's been, 10, 15 years of daily training for like in my daily alarm is titled always game ready, right? Just
I love
meaning
that.
like staying ready to say yes to
Yeah.
opportunities. That was how I was able to climb Mount Rainier here. I live in Washington State, like Seattle. I had a buddy, same an Ironman guy who asked me to climb Rainier. We had, 1 week till we were at the top, and I said, let's do it.
Yeah. I love
Like,
that.
and without having to be nervous for like my physical condition, right? I when strapped up a backpack and ripped this mountain that's a local to us with a couple dumbbells in the pack and said, "Yep, let's do it." Felt good. Give my little training. But I have been training, for the last decade, the way that I see it.
Yeah.
So to say yes. So I also think it's super cool that Aaron, right, sees that, quote failure, and then almost it sounded like her idea almost to like give you the encouragement to say, hey, like I'm behind you, go do this, right, and go finish what you started
Yeah.
and set out to do, which was super cool to hear.
Right. And those races aren't cheap. I
No.
had to buy a bike for it. And I didn't
Yeah.
get that fancy of a bike, but the cheapest one you can find is a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
And the ticket to the race was like 700 or 800 bucks.
Yep.
And
Yeah. It's no
to
joke.
then have to buy another ticket,
Mm-hmm.
which really at the end of the day, it wasn't that much money, but it is
Mm-hmm.
still
Mm-hmm.
substantial.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she was very supportive and just like go after it.
It's cool.
She actually took an because we have two young kids. We hired a nanny. She hired a nanny to come over, and she surprised me by taking an Uber from Atlanta to Augusta, which is like 2 hours. And she was at the finish line when I was waiting.
Wow. That's cool,
Hmm.
man.
And
That's
then,
cool.
of course, she made me drive home that night with
Yep.
legs that were wasted.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you know your place.
Um, but yeah, so cool. So, so after that experience, I now set one physical challenge every year.
Okay.
And I did the year after, I set a marathon as a goal. I failed it. I waited until the end of the year to do it. And I got a foot injury, so I wasn't able to achieve it.
Mm.
So then this year rolls around. I was like, I'm doing it at the beginning of the year. So I ran a marathon in April. But again, I failed, but I had to check it off.
Yep.
And my actual next challenge was going to be to summit the Grand Teton in Jackson
Okay.
Hole.
Yeah.
I'm terrified of
Yeah.
heights,
Yeah.
terrified.
Yeah.
But I got invited to go on this heli skiing trip
No
next year
kidding.
in February. And that took 100% or 150% of my do big challenges budget. And so
That's
I
no
think
joke.
next year I'm gonna do the heli skiing, and then after that I'm gonna have to do the Grand Teton.
That's freaking epic. Where are you going? Like Alaska or Canada?
It's some remote place in Canada. It's called like the Silver Tip Lodge.
Okay.
But I know I just fly to Vancouver and then take a
Yeah.
plane, another plane.
Yeah.
So,
Very
but yeah,
cool. Very cool.
I'll share one thing about that as well. Like one of the goals that I set in my vision is, in my vision, I want to surround myself with people that can take me to the next level.
For
And
sure.
you always hear that advice from people that are older than us, like, hey, you need to surround yourself with people that are better than you, that really can challenge you, that'll push you to that next level. And while yes, I always try to do that, this is the first time I'm like investing in it.
Hmm.
So all the people going on this trip, there's 16 of them. They're all entrepreneurs that are that have exited at least one business, probably
Wow.
more. And and so I'm paying a lot of money, but to me it's an investment to make a better network and hopefully long time friends.
Hmm.
So that's one new thing I'm doing, is actually like putting money into building that network of mine, which I've never done before.
Hmm.
It's kind of cool that I can do it heli skiing.
I was just gonna say it's kind of like your own mastermind, just with the a heliskiing trip involved,
Right.
which is
But I
probably
never
the
would have done
best
it.
way to do that.
I never would have done this had I not set that vision.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Because I'm also a believer, as I'm sure you are, like, you put those intentions out into the world, things are gonna move and
I-
shake to make that happen, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny on a much, much, much smaller scale. Even tonight, like I'm going out to dinner with a buddy who, in my eyes, is, 4 or 5 steps ahead of me. And
Mhm.
it's like, you know, pretty 20 bucks for dinner for probably like, couple years worth of knowledge to discuss at a dinner table,
Yep.
so it's like just based on how do you, rearrange the perspective on how you see it, right? So
Right.
thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. If you got to the end of this episode, can you please do me a huge favor and leave a 5-star rating and review? This helps me be able to reach out to bigger guests and also be able to get access to special events and activities that otherwise would not be possible without your support. So if you could please take just 3 seconds and leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me, and I will see you on the next episode.